So today I wanted to talk about channeling and compare my experience with channeling to how the Book of Mormon was channeled and the Book of Abraham. And I would also say Doctrine and Covenants was clearly channeled. This is my set of scriptures that I got when I was in 9th grade. And I have the matching Bible to this. So this is the Mormon scriptures. It has the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price, which has the Book of Abraham and some church history in it. So this is, in my opinion, channeled material. And I want to quote from the church's website, specifically about Book of Mormon translation. This is Emma. She was talking to her son, Joseph Smith III, about the Book of Mormon and its translation. She says, "The Book of Mormon is of divine authenticity. I have not the slightest doubt of it. I am satisfied that no man could have dictated the writing of the manuscripts unless he was inspired. For when acting as his scribe, your father would dictate to me for hour after hour, and when returning after meals or after interruptions, he would once again begin where he left off, without either seeing the manuscript or having any portion of it read to him." So Mormons were taught this is, a miraculous way that Joseph Smith wrote down the Book of Mormon. He never looked at what he had written before, and it was a continuous stream of channeling. That's what I would call it. And he was inspired, and it was by the gift and power of God that this book came into being. Emma goes on to describe how the golden plates were on the table, but wrapped in a cloth. She never saw the actual plates, just what was supposed to be the plates under a cloth. A lot of people saw that, but nobody was allowed to see what was under the cloth. Oliver Cowdery testified under oath in 1831 that Joseph Smith found the plates from which he translated his book with two transparent stones resembling glass set in silver bows. That's what I was led to believe as a youth, taught that was the Urim and Thummim, that they were kind of like glasses with a breastplate that he used to translate. A picture. So the church, if you go on the church's website, they will still depict the translation of the Book of Mormon like this. Joseph looking at golden plates and figuring out the translation. Right here, they're down here, they kind of show what could be the Urim and Thummim. But later, we learn that's not accurate. What is accurate, I'll read in just a minute. If I can find it. I had it marked. So when he got the golden plates, those glasses for the translation set in spectacles were with the Book of Mormon. That is not it. Sorry. Okay. According to many other accounts, Joseph placed either the interpreters or a seer stone. That's misleading because we know it was not the interpreters he put in a hat. He put his seer stone in a hat and then put his face in the hat to block out all the light, and then spoke through the hat to his scribes. And we're supposed to believe, now his seer stone was dark. You can see, in fact, maybe I'll put a link to the showing what his seer stone looked like. And many other people had seer stones in the church. This was a very common thing, in the 19th century for people to believe in treasure hunting, crystals, stones can reveal things, right? So he put his special stone in his special hat, covered his face, and dictated the Book of Mormon. Channeled is the word I would use. According to these accounts, Joseph placed his face into the hat to block out extra light and read aloud the English words that appeared on the instrument, his stone. That's deceptive that the church is putting on their website. The process as described brings to mind a passage from the Book of Mormon that speaks of God preparing a stone which shall shine forth in darkness unto light. I believe that is a pretty out of context. They're talking about the stones that the brother of Jared used to light the barge. That whole story is pretty ridiculous as well. A stone which shall shine forth in darkness unto light. And then we're supposed to believe that Joseph Smith read words, not just read words, but that he saw the Egyptian character appear on the stone, and then a translation of what that character meant. Sometimes that would be a word, or it would be a whole sentence. And then when he was done and that was completely written down, it would disappear and a new one would come on. So that is how Joseph Smith channeled the Book of Mormon. Emma told her son, of course, that he would do this for hours at a time and never look back at what he had previously written. There have been many people who have channeled amazing works. And comparing this to what other people have channeled, this isn't very much. A Course in Miracles, I found this book after leaving the Mormon Church. I'm pretty sure I wrote down every time I've gone through it at least 4 times. Must be the other. I have 2 copies of this book. This book is more worn than my scriptures. I had these for, 30 years, 35 years. And I had this for 4 years, and it is way bigger. It's like 600 pages. Well, there's more than that. It's over 1,000 pages if you add the lessons. Because so I started this the year I left the church. It's a channeled message from Jesus. And I would say way more relevant than the Book of Mormon if someone is on a spiritual path seeking to really know God. And there is a lesson for every single day of the year. So you can use this book several different ways. This lady also channeled without picking up where she left off, or without going back and rereading where she left off. Very similar to how the Book of Mormon was produced. Another book. Because of this book, The Way of Mastery, this is where I got the courage to write my own book, my own story from leaving the Mormon Church. It was because of this channeled book from Jesus. It's another channeled book, which I have marked up just like my scriptures. This book means way more to me than the Book of Mormon or the Bible. Talking about the soul's journey, and it has 3 parts. And I've done this book also 4 times. First time was in January of 2015. The last time was in April of 2023. You go through it. There's meditations that go with it. This, another channeled book that is bigger, longer than the Book of Mormon. And I would say these were also channeled by the gift and power of God, creator, source, whatever you want to call it. I have no doubt Joseph Smith channeled this book, right? But I do believe he was inspired by a lot of things in his time. There were other books, I think, that he knew about and referenced in used as a springing board, just like with the Book of Abraham. He used, he used the papyrus as a springing board for his inspiration. He filled in the parts that were missing, and clearly it is. He did not translate. He did not take the actual words off the papyrus and they were the Book of Abraham. That is not how it worked. It was just inspiration, because now we know the exact interpretation of those fragments of papyrus that he had in his possession, and it was not the Book of Abraham. So now the church had to switch from a translation to inspiration. And I want to talk about the Book of Abraham another time. So channeling is, I would agree, something that can be done by the gift and power of God, Creator, Source. But you have to be careful, because if you don't know what you're doing or how to protect yourself, you could be channeling something not of the light, not of a Christ consciousness. You could channel something dark. And when this gift first came to me, it was right after my mother died, and I had come home, and I'm going to read some of my experience from my book, and some I will just share, just tell. So I channeled 3 letters from my mother after she passed within the first year of her death. And the first letter was for my father. The second letter was for me. And then the last letter was also for my father. And so my mom passed, and I went home to be with my family and help plan the funeral. And then I was going to hurry right back to my dad. The day I had to, so my mother's anniversary of her death/resurrection was on May 8th, which was almost a week ago. And I got out my old journals that I wrote while she was passing, and wrote down her experiences with being in and out of this world, because it took her 4 days to cross over. And then I read the account of how I channeled that first letter to her. I was writing in my journal about her passing, and I wrote 23 pages, because there were so many details that I wanted to remember. And then just as I was finishing this, I'm going to pick up from my book, I could feel Mom's presence with me for the first time since the death of her body. I started crying. I could barely see my journal, but the thought came to me to start a letter to my dad. I remember writing, "Dear John," and then it was like I was in a different world. Everything stopped while I wrote a lovely letter to my dad from my mom. I filled 2 pages of my journal, front and back. I tore it from my book, put it in an envelope, and I took it with us to his home that night. So my dad lives 2 hours away from me. So we drove to his home, and we were going to be there through the funeral. Then the next problem, I knew I was supposed to give this letter to my dad, but I could never find the right opportunity. And that whole trip came and went, and I had never given my dad the letter. I took it back home with me. So that was May. The first part of June, my parents were married in June, and I was going up to see my dad for what would have been his 67th wedding anniversary. And very clearly, my mother made it known to me that this was the moment I needed to share that letter with my dad. So I wanted to read from him. So this letter that I had channeled like the month before was specifically for their wedding anniversary, which I did not know at the time I was channeling it. So I gave it to my dad, and I explained to him, now my dad is super Mormon, okay, and he's not happy with me that I left the church. If you watched the video about my mom, the holy priesthood versus Reiki, you will know that my dad saw me as a witch more than a daughter, or I was also labeled as a servant of Satan. So here's me as his daughter who still loves him, and you know, that's just a really hard label to have put on you. My dad and I were so close for most of my life, and then to have it all change when I left the church, I didn't know how he was going to accept this channeled message from my mom through his evil witchy daughter. But much to my relief, when I gave him the letter, he read it out loud and he started crying. And it was a beautiful moment, probably one of those best moments that I've had since leaving the church with my father. He told me he had been praying every night since mom had died, asking for something specific. And he did not tell me what that was, only that the letter that I had given him had answered his prayer. And of course, I didn't know that he had been praying for this answer from my mother for, almost a month at that point, because the funeral was on the 17th of May and their anniversary was on the 16th of June. So it had been over a month since I had channeled this letter. I did not know that my dad was asking certain things of my mom and praying to her, and that I was the answer to his prayer to my mother. I just followed my inspiration and wrote the letter as it came to me, and it was very much an automatic writing experience. I didn't have to think about the words. They just came into my mind and I wrote them down. That's how I channeled that first letter from my mom. So for me, an apostate of the Mormon Church, to give him this beautiful channeled message in answer to his prayer from my mother, it was a beautiful night and a beautiful experience, because I expected him to be angry at me. And it was the next morning when the anger had come out. He had all night to think about it. And so that morning, first thing when I came upstairs and met him, he wanted to talk about the church and all the reasons I left, which he had never wanted to do before. So in a way, I was grateful for that opportunity to kind of explain my side and to tell him the reasons why, because he certainly had never shown any interest or desire to understand that before. And so for 3 hours, we sat and talked, had a dialogue that sometimes got into argument. It wasn't all rainbows and roses. Like, he truly wanted to understand. He also wanted to kind of tell me all the reasons why I was deceived, how I was being deceived by Satan and going to hell. By the end of those 3 hours, it was dreadful. I was ready to go home. And the only thing I had on my side was this channeled letter from my mother that meant so much to him. Yet he was having trouble reconciling the fact that I no longer had the gift of the Holy Ghost. So if I don't have the gift of the Holy Ghost and I can't translate or channel by the gift and power of God, I'm under Satan's influence. That means I channeled with the gift and power of Satan, but it was an answer to his prayer. So he was having a really hard time with all of that. And I just left him went back home, and I'd done what I was supposed to do. And, I let him sit and wrestle with that. What it led to was my father writing our entire family a very long letter. He'd actually started it with my mother before she passed because I had left the church. They felt this burden of guilt that I was the last true believing Mormon of their children that had kids. I was the last one to leave the church that, it sounds awful, but how to say this right. They had one daughter that was still believing and in the church. And then all the rest of us were gone. And out of the other 4 children that left, I was the last to leave the church. And because of that, that really shook them up. I had a family. I had 8 kids. They felt like what they had to do for their conscience to be clear before they died was to send everyone in our family a letter about how we were all wrong and basically going to hell for leaving the church. And it outlined, exactly why we were going to hell, because all of us that left had attended the temple and then rejected those temple covenants. So that's pretty much why we were going to hell, because we had been through the temple and then changed our minds. So he wrote this letter, sent it all to the family, my extended family. So all the nieces and nephews got a copy, all of us and our spouses got a copy, so he could die with a clear conscience. That's the whole reason he did that. The next letter that I channeled was a message for me. So my birthday is 9/11. And in the year that my mom passed, my son Richard had gone into the Marines. That summer, he was at boot camp for 13 weeks and almost died right at the beginning of the training. And so he was medically, he could not train for about a week. So that put him in a different company. So originally we weren't supposed to see him on my birthday, but because of that change in his seriousness of his illness, we were seeing him. Family Day was going to be on my birthday, 9/11, and that's graduation also for him. So we were going to California to be with Richard, and there was something that I wanted from my mother for my birthday, and my dad was really stingy with all of my mom's stuff. He was not letting anything out of his possession of my mother's. And what I wanted was my mom's ring. It's a sapphire ring with diamonds around it. And she promised me this was coming to me anyways, but my dad wasn't going to give anybody anything of my mom's for an entire year after her death. He said he was going to hold on to everything for that long. And so I was going up to my dad's before my birthday to just see him. My dad was also in the military. He served in the Navy. So my father understood, the importance of, the training that my son was going through. And so I wanted to see my dad before we left for California, and I wanted to ask him for this ring. I wanted it to go with me to California. This is my first birthday without my mother. We had gotten close at the very end of her life through the experiences with Reiki. And I knew my mother would want me to have this. I just knew it was okay for me to ask, but I was afraid because of how my dad viewed me as a servant of Satan and this witch. And here I am asking for mom's, one of her rings. And I felt like I might come across as greedy in his eyes, but I knew I had mother on my side. Like I knew she was okay with that. And so again, we were getting ready for this trip, and I had to go pick up my kids from school, and I grabbed the mail on my way. And there was a letter from Richard in the stack. Oh, whew. And we didn't hear from him very often. Writing letters was not something he got to do very often. So when we got a letter from him, it was, precious as his mother. And I read his letter, and the first thing I wanted to do was call my mom. But she's dead, right? So I'm sitting there in the school pickup line, starting to cry and bawl because I'm so touched by what my son was writing me. Number one, he had passed the crucible. That was over. He was a Marine. And I was just, as a mother, very happy that part was over. And I really, really wanted to share it with my mom. So I'm sobbing in the pickup line, and so clearly I felt my mom's presence come to me. This is, 4 months after she's passed. And I hadn't felt that since I channeled the letter from my dad. So it was very clear, the difference between having her come into my energy field. And that night, when I was writing in my journal before bed, the impression came to write a letter to myself. And she said, "Dear Mindy, happy birthday, dear. I am just a thought away." And then I wrote pages from my mother. And she told me many different things that I had wanted to hear when she was alive, but she wasn't able to say. There was no judgment from her on the other side. There was no feeling of I was a servant of Satan and didn't deserve to have this communication with her. It was divine love, and it just felt peaceful, truthful, clear. So the next day I went to see my dad, and I brought my journal, and we had lunch together, and I told him about the letter. I didn't let him read it. I thought maybe I would. That's why I brought it. But when I was actually in the situation to share it with him, I did not feel like sharing it. Felt like it was precious, and I didn't want him to get mad at me like he had 3 months earlier when I shared his letter. So I just brought the journal kind of as a proof. What mom wrote is in here, but I don't want to share it. And I said, "Mom said I could have something for my birthday, and I'm here to ask you for that." And then my dad, we're both crying at this point. My dad said this to me. He said, "I knew I was supposed to give you something special from your mom, but I didn't know what it was. I've been trying to think of what she would want to give you for your birthday, and I couldn't come up with anything. I'm so glad you asked for her ring. It is the perfect gift for your birthday, and I really want you to take her ring." That made me cry even harder because I knew how hard it was for him to part with anything that belonged to my mother. So even though this is a small little token that he was not looking at every day, I know he didn't want to give up anything that belonged to her. So for him to say yes, for me to take my ring, because it was my ring now that she had crossed, it was supposed to go to me. For him to say yes, that I could take it, meant a lot. So I took that ring with me. to California to see my son graduate. We had a beautiful week experience with Richard, and then we got to have a little family vacation. We took all of our kids except the youngest two, my daughter with special needs, and my son, who was only at that point like 2.5. So we didn't take them, but we had a beautiful, beautiful experience in San Diego with my son. The last message that came, it came at the 1-year mark of her passing. So that was 10 years ago that I got this last message from my mother on her 1-year anniversary, I say, of being resurrected, because she went back to spirit. That's who we truly are. The truth of who we are is our spirit, our soul. So that was her returning, her going home. So I'm acknowledging her that night, the day that she died. And I asked her, well, I started drawing a mandala, which is like a circle picture with, it can be anything in the middle. But usually mandalas are circles. And I'd started this the night before. And I don't want to read all that. Okay, so I was sitting at my mom's desk that Dad also let me take early. My mom had a real top desk, and I used my real top desk for my divinations. Like, I had my crystal ball, I had my little crystal pendulum, I had my tarot cards all on her desk, and I consider these my sacred tools. I have many crystals for different uses and reasons. So anyways, her desk changed from my very straight-laced Mormon mother simple office desk to a very witchy woo-woo, full of yummy crystals and, my divination tools. So I'm sitting there, I've drawn this mandala from the night before, and I decided to sit down. I also had my art supplies. I wanted to color the mandala that I had drawn. And so I wanted to I pulled out my watercolor pencils, and as I looked at the picture, unmistakably my mom came into my mind and said, "The flower is a rainbow." That was crystal clear. My mom saying the flower is a rainbow. And so I pulled out the colors for a rainbow, and I colored the flower in the middle like a rainbow. Then as I'm doing this, I can feel my mom getting closer to me. Like, her presence is just more and more tangible around me. And I asked aloud, I'm like, "Okay, Mom, what color should be the space around the flower?" Pink. It came very quickly. And so that is what I did for like however long it took for this picture to get finished. I would say, "Okay, now what color should this be? What color should that be?" after I'd finished it. And in the end, we finished this picture together. It's just simple. It's a simple mandala, but I did this with my mom. She chose every color, and this is what it came out as. So after I finished this, I asked, "Is there anything you want to say to Dad?" Because I have my mom so clear, and she's answering in my head. She's saying. So I wrote the next letter, the last thing I channeled for my dad. And it was just like before. "Dear John, blah, blah, blah." Out came a letter. And then on the back of the mandala, so I finished the letter to my dad. Before I knew this connection was going to end, I wanted to ask my mom some of the meaning of the colors. And I wrote a little thank you to her from me for just coming to me and guiding me, because that was really special for me, the wicked, wicked daughter, for her to come spend some time. And then she answered me about what the colors mean to her, and the order and why they were the colors that she chose. Okay, so now I have this second letter for my father, and this is 2015 May, and so we're going up for Memorial Day weekend. That's when I'm going to give my dad this channeled letter. And I did let my dad have this picture. He photocopied a copy for me, and then I got the original back after he passed. But he kept the picture with him with the letter. So from the moment I left the church, my dad had been trying to pull me back. And at this point, it's been 4 years. May of 2015, it's 4 years since I left. And I give my dad this second letter. I show the picture, I tell the story, and he's reading the letter and crying. And he came over and hugged me and said, "I have my daughter back." I was his prodigal daughter. I was the one that had left, and he truly thought with that last letter that I had channeled for my mom that I was coming back into the religion. He totally misunderstood. He believed that I was returning to the fold, coming home, all of that. And I don't understand what in that letter made him think that, because I've read it so many times, and there's nothing about me. There's nothing about the Mormon church. The only thing that the letter told him that he might have taken as my return is my mom said to not worry anymore. My mom specifically told him, do not worry anymore. And I think he took that to mean do not worry about the children that had left the church. And I think he took that as a sign that I was coming back. And so the next day, my dad brought me a stack of articles about Joseph Smith, and he asked me to take them home, pray about them. So this was before Memorial Weekend, because he asked me to take them home, pray about them, and then I was coming back from Memorial Weekend. So I'd given him the letter before Memorial Weekend. My job was to go home and pray, and I said I would. I mean, I sincerely took my dad's request to heart. He wanted me to look at these materials about the church and pray again and see if it wouldn't soften my heart. And then he also had one more condition. He wanted me to go to church with him the Sunday before Memorial Day. That was a big ask, because I did not go back to church very often for anybody. And so I did agree, because I knew how much that meant to my father. So Memorial Weekend comes, I have prayed, I have gone through all his stuff, and once your eyes are open, it's really easy to see the bullshit and to see the deception and to see where the church either lied by omission or is outright lying. And so it did not do anything to bring me back into the church to read those things. And I'm sitting there in church with him, and it is so crystal clear to me why I left, and that I do not ever want to be back in the pew listening to Mormon men, bishops, counselors, rattle off whatever they're going to preach about that day. that is not the energy I ever want to be in again. So I did everything he had asked. And then he wanted to have a talk about it, a conversation. And that was a really, really awful, hard conversation. Again, it was just like with the first letter. We sat for hours talking, hashing apart the church. My father's side of the family is known for arguing. They can argue to the death, and I am very much have that ability as well. My mother's side is more angry. They have the fire, and so the combination is not great. we can argue, and it can escalate and get very intense when my family gets together and they are talking politics or religion. So I had that experience with my dad, and it just sucked everything out of me. He came away with the 100% belief I was deceived by Satan, and he would never see me any other way. And I basically know that was probably the weekend, the moment when my dad was for sure in his heart about disowning me. It was that Memorial Day weekend when we came together, and there was no reconciliation of my beliefs and his. The next morning, I had to take our dog out, like it's 8 a.m. and it's Memorial Day. And my dad was out working in the garden. I'm letting my dogs run, and he walks over to me, and it was freezing. He put his hands like right on my shoulders and got right in my face and asked me about, was I truly ever going to come back to the church? It was like his one last shot at it. And I laughed at the ridiculousness of that moment. It's freezing. I'm in my pajamas. My dogs are out here, and he wants to have this, like, you tell me in my face, are you ever coming back? I'm like, no. I am never coming back in this lifetime. I am not Mormon anymore. And I really believe that was the moment the switch went in his head. He could reconcile all the help I had given to my mother when she was transitioning, and the letters I had channeled, if I was going to come back. Because that was one of the things he threw in my face was, you have the ability to channel. He's like, Joseph Smith channeled the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham. He's like, you have that gift. And so the church is true. And I'm like, I don't see it that way, Dad. That is not, that's like saying A and B. A plus B is, Z. No, it's just because we had the same gift. I'm like, everybody has that gift. Anybody could learn to channel something if they wanted to. Joseph Smith wasn't special. I'm not special. Anyone could have that gift. We all have gifts of clairvoyance, clairaudience. There's at least 9 shamanic gifts that everyone could learn to use for their own, benefit on their spiritual path. Like, Joseph Smith wasn't special. I said the difference between me and Joseph Smith is I'm not telling the world they have to believe in me, and I'm not creating a multi-billion-dollar corporation taking people's money. I said Joseph Smith did that. He was a charlatan, told people the only way back to God is through him, and that's not true. And I said, I can see how he deceived people with his gifts. And at this point, I knew about Joseph Smith and his polygamy, which I did not know as a member of the church. And I'm like, there is no way he just created this religion out of the goodness of his heart because it was God's will. I said he created it because he wanted power, he wanted money, he wanted women, he wanted sex. And I have this talisman. This was on Joseph Smith's body when he died. This talisman, Jupiter talisman, meant for power, for women getting sexual power over women. That is one of the things this talisman does. This was a prized possession of Joseph Smith. He was in the occult. He had this magic mindset, and to think any differently just means you have not studied church history specifically around Joseph Smith and what was important to him. Women, lots of sexual partners, super important. Not having to earn a living the normal way, hard labor, super important to him to not do. This religion was his golden ticket. This channeling of the Book of Mormon, was his golden ticket. And whoever got in his way, be damned. Emma Smith got in his way. Oh, he threatened her with destruction, right? I mean, she did not like polygamy. She did not like the idea of all his spiritual wives. And that's one thing this thing helped him accomplish. Charisma. Jupiter talisman. Look it up. So I'm telling this to my dad. Me and Joseph Smith, yeah, sure, we can channel stuff, but I don't deceive people with it. I said, I have no agenda. I'm giving you this message from Mom out of the goodness of my heart. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything. Joseph Smith wants, 10%. The Mormon Church wants 10% of your money. And to this day, they will tell you, if your choice is between feeding your family and giving tithing to the church, pay your fucking tithing. That is what the church will tell you. That is the most important thing. Because God needs his money. He's a multi-billion-dollar corporation church, but, he needs your 10%. So, yeah, it did not go well with me and my dad the rest of that weekend. I want to read from the Gospel of Thomas, and oh my God, there are so many good Gospels out there that are not a part of the Bible, that the Bible, the people who wrote the Bible, the men who put the Bible together, wanted destroyed. And the Gospel of Thomas is one of them. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, another one. Gospel of Judas. And I will also just share this little tidbit about Jesus. The stories of Jesus come from Apollonius. The life of Apollonius of Tyana. They stole his life for Jesus in the Bible. There was no man named Jesus. There was a man named Apollonius, and he did a lot of the miracles and same things that Jesus did. But the church doesn't want you to know about that. The church doesn't want you to know about the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary Magdalene especially. There are so many. Oh, there's another one right here. The Pittis Sophia Unveiled, the secret teachings of Jesus recorded by his disciples. There is so much out there that the church does not want you to know about. Okay, so back to the Gospel of Thomas. Read these other works of Scripture. Don't take it literal. Just take away the messages that the esoteric teachings that they are presenting, not the exoteric. Exoteric is for the masses that they want to control. The esoteric is the secret teachings within the scriptures. Another video for another time. Gospel of Thomas, this quote. It reads, Yeshua said, "The kingdom is like the shepherd with 100 sheep. one of them disappears. It was the most beautiful. The shepherd left the other 99 sheep and looked only for that one until he found it. After his great effort, he said to the lamb, I love you more than the other 99. The truth is that God loves the sinner just as much as the saint. We all know the story of the lost sheep. Jesus goes and finds the sheep and brings it back to the fold. But we are not told this little piece, I love you more than the other 99. The church does not want that message out. Jesus was not a believer in punishment. Nobody like Jesus, meaning an enlightened person, can be a believer in eternal punishment, in hell, in a blood sacrifice. Punishment is revenge. And the Jesus of the Gnostic Gospels dropped the need for revenge and punishment for a reason. Compassion. I believe in a God that is compassionate, unconditional love, extends unconditional forgiveness, because the truth is we are all a spark of God. We are all a spark of our Creator, our creation. And Jesus is not the only one that had that divine connection and communication with God or Source. We all have that ability to talk to God and hear what is the purpose for our own life. There are universal laws in place, cosmic laws. And we do reap what we sow through our choices, the choices that we make. Natural laws bring consequences, but not God's judgment. So I think there's one thing more. So to kind of wrap up the story with my dad, he lived another, just a little over a year and a half. He got diagnosed with cancer, and I am going to share my experience with being disowned by him and my mother-in-law in a future episode. Because of Mormonism, that is why both of them chose to disown me and lock me out of their hearts and their wills, because of this idea that I was now serving Satan. It is a black and white, all or nothing, us versus them religion, the Mormon Church. And they don't have a very big tent for people who do not look like the cookie cutter Mormon. They're not diverse with LGBTQ, transgender. They want everyone to look, act, think like them. There is a Mormon mold. And if you don't fit in it, they're going to squish you down until you are broken and forced to conform. There's no great diversity in the Mormon Church. And I feel like that is the exact opposite of the message of the Jesus they believe in, claim to believe in. So, yeah, that's a topic for another time. That was my experience with channeling. I believe the gift and power of God. That's how the church wants to call it. I call it Source, Creator, Creatress. The Holy Trinity in my mind is Mother, Father, Child as one. It is the feminine and the masculine coming together in creating. So, yeah. I think that's where I'll end it today. Joseph Smith channeled the Book of Mormon, Book of Abraham, the Doctrine and Covenants. These are things, yes, he was inspired, I'm sure. But he used his channeling, his gift, as a way for manipulation, control, and to gain things for himself, for his family. And we're free to use our gifts in that way, if we so choose. But that was not the Christ-like way. So yeah. Okay, I'll leave that there today. And next time, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what inspires me. Oh.